The forest was quiet, too quiet. Human soldier Rook waited in the shadows, holding his rifle close. He didn't move, didn't even blink. His trap was set 3 weeks ago, deep between 2 trees, covered in dry leaves and mud. It wasn't for food. It was for the enemy. They had sent alien scouts into this area. Fast, deadly, with claws sharper than knives and night vision better than any human tech. Rook had fought them before. He knew how dangerous they were, so he made a trap. Strong wires, pressure plates, a signal that would beep the moment something or someone fell in. But for 22 days, nothing. Until today. Beep, the sound, was soft, but sharp. Rook's eyes snapped open. He grabbed his rifle, slid his helmet on, and ran toward the signal point. His boots barely touched the ground. He stayed low, alert. Finally, he thought, got one. He reached the clearing. Leaves were scattered. The dirt had shifted. The trap had triggered. Someone was in it. He raised his rifle, heart pounding. Then he saw her. It wasn't a soldier. It wasn't a beast. It was a girl. Alien. Small, thin, covered in dirt and bruises. Her skin was pale blue, marked with scratches. Her hair was long and tangled like vines. She looked no older than 13. Her leg was caught in the trap's clamp, tight but not broken. Tears ran down her cheeks. She wasn't fighting. She was crying. Rook didn't lower his gun. He stepped closer. Slowly. Carefully. "Don't move," he said, even though he knew she wouldn't understand. She didn't reply, just stared at him with wide, terrified eyes. And then she whispered something, a soft word, shaky in her own language, then she fainted. Rook's heart thumped hard. This wasn't what he expected. This wasn't a threat. This was a child. He stood over her, gun still raised, waiting, watching, confused. Was she a spy? A trap herself, he thought, or just lost? The trap had torn her pants and left a bruise, but no deep wound. Still, she had passed out from pain, cold, or fear. Maybe all three. Rook cursed under his breath. He was a soldier, a tracker, a killer if needed. But now, he was just a man staring at a broken child. He sighed and slowly put the rifle away. Then, he knelt beside her. Her breathing was weak but steady. He looked around. No enemy soldiers, no signs of an ambush. Just the wind in the trees. Just her. With one strong pull, he opened the trap and freed her leg. She didn't wake. He checked for weapons, nothing, not even shoes. Her feet were scraped and bloody. Rook didn't know what to do. Leave her? Turn her in? She was the enemy's kind. But something in her face, something soft and afraid, stopped him. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her thin body. Then he lifted her into his arms. She didn't weigh much. She didn't move. Back at his small camp, Rook laid her near the fire. She shivered in her sleep. He gave her water, just a few drops, then covered her with a blanket. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. He didn't ask why. He didn't need to. He had seen enough pain in war to recognize hunger and fear. That night, Rook didn't sleep. He sat beside her with his rifle across, his lap, eyes on the forest, waiting. Not for enemies now, but for answers. He had set the trap for a monster. But a child had fallen in. And now he had to decide what to do with her. The fire cracked softly in the cold night air. The alien girl still hadn't woken up. She lay on Rook's spare sleeping mat, wrapped in 2 old blankets. Her breathing was shallow. Her face was pale. Her bruised leg rested on a folded jacket, and a small water bottle sat near her hand. Rook sat across from her, rifle in his lap, watching. Thinking. He had fought her kind before. Tall warriors with hard armor and eyes that glowed in the dark. They were fast, brutal, and silent. This girl was none of that. She was thin, lost, shaking in her sleep, more like a stray animal than a soldier. Maybe she's a scout, he muttered to himself. But scouts didn't cry, and they didn't faint. The stars above blinked quietly. The trees stood still. Somewhere far in the dark, a nightbird cried. Rook turned back to the girl. She moved slightly, her lips parting, then slowly, her eyes opened. She looked around fast, panic flashing in her face. Rook didn't move. Her gaze landed on him. She froze. He raised both hands slowly. No gun in them now. Easy, he said. You're safe here. Of course, she didn't understand the words, but maybe she understood the tone because she didn't scream, didn't run, just stared. Then she looked down at her leg, bandaged, wrapped, clean. She blinked, confused, then looked at the fire, then at him again. I could have left you out there, Rook said quietly. But I didn't. She didn't answer, didn't speak, just sat still, like she didn't know if this was real. After a long pause, Rook reached beside him and held up a food bar. He broke it in half. He tossed one piece toward her gently. She flinched. The bar bounced and landed near her blanket. She stared at it, then slowly picked it up. She sniffed it, bit once, then ate it all. Rook watched her with quiet surprise. She didn't eat like a soldier. She ate like someone who hadn't seen food in days. You're just a kid, he said under his breath. The girl looked at him, tilting her head slightly. He repeated slower. Child. He pointed to her. Child. Then to himself. Man. He didn't know why he said it, but something in her eyes changed like a flicker of understanding. She hugged the blanket closer and looked at the fire. Hours passed. She didn't try to escape. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't speak. She just sat there, curled up, sometimes glancing at Rook, like she wasn't sure if he was real. The next morning, Rook boiled some water and poured it into a small cup. He added dried herbs from his field kit, barely anything, but warm. He handed the cup to her. She took it with both hands and held it, close to her face. She sniffed, then sipped, then stopped. She looked at him, eyes wide. She smiled, just a little. But Rook saw it, and it hit him harder than any battle ever had. Later, he picked up his rifle and stood. I'll scout the North Ridge, he said. You stay. He pointed to the sleeping mat. Stay. She watched him silently. Rook walked into the woods just far enough to check the traps. None were triggered. He came back after 20 minutes. She was still there, sitting, waiting, not running, not hiding, waiting for him. That night, he sat by the fire again, staring at the flames. He looked at her. You're not a threat, he said softly. You're just a child. And deep inside, for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel alone anymore. The next morning, fog wrapped the forest like a blanket. Rook sat by the fire, sharpening his knife. The alien girl, still wrapped in his spare blanket, slept quietly across from him. Her breathing was soft now, calm. Not like when she first arrived, shaking and afraid. She had eaten a full meal the night before. She hadn't spoken. Not a word, but she had started to trust him. A little. And that was the problem. He looked at her as he cleaned his gear. She shouldn't be here. This forest was not safe. Enemy patrols could pass by. His mission was still active, and she was not part of it. He stood slowly and walked over to her. She opened her eyes the moment his boots touched the grass. She sat up, blinking, alert. Rook knelt and pointed toward the mountain valley to the east. Go, he said. This way. He showed her a small bag with food inside, then handed her a flask of water. You'll be safer there. I'm not your guardian. She looked at the bag, then at him, then back at the fire. He took her hand and placed the bag in it gently. "Go," he repeated. His voice wasn't cruel. It was tired, quiet, sad. He helped her to her feet. She stood for a long time, not moving. Then, slowly she turned. She didn't cry, she didn't argue. She just walked away. Rook didn't watch her go. He sat back down at the fire and stared into the flames. His chest felt tight. He tried to tell himself it was the right choice, that she was just an alien girl, that she didn't belong here, that she would be safer without him. But all those words felt empty. He stayed in the camp the rest of the day. Alone. The silence was heavy again, worse than before. The kind of silence that reminds you what you've lost. He tried to eat. Couldn't. Tried to clean his weapon. But his hands moved too slow. When the sun dipped behind the trees, he finally stood and walked to the edge of camp. He looked out into the forest just in case, but it was quiet. Empty. He turned to go back and froze. She was there, standing just beyond the trees, her blanket torn on one side, mud on her knees, scratches on her hands. She clutched the bag of food he had given her, and in her hand was something else, his scarf. The old one he had lost weeks ago, worn, faded, but his. She had found it and brought it back. Rook stared at her. "What are you doing?" he asked, though he knew she wouldn't understand. She stepped forward slowly, carefully, not begging, not afraid. She just held out the scarf with both hands and looked at him with wide, tired eyes, eyes that said one thing clearly: "I have nowhere else to go." He sighed, deep, heavy, then stepped aside. She walked past him quietly, back to the fire, back to her place, like she never left. That night he handed her a fresh shirt, too big but clean. She nodded once in thanks, then sat near the fire. She took a stick and began to draw shapes in the dirt, small stars, circles, a mountain. Then she pointed at herself. "Tari," she said softly. Rook blinked. "Tari?" She nodded again, then pointed at him. Waited. "Rook," he said. Her lips moved, trying to copy it. Rook, he said again, slower. Rook. She smiled, and for the first time, he smiled too. The forest didn't feel so cold anymore, and Rook finally realized he had tried to send her away, but she had already found her way back. To him. The forest slept under a black sky. The campfire had burned low, leaving only red embers. Rook lay on his back, one hand on his rifle, the other resting across his chest. His eyes were closed, but his ears stayed sharp. Tari was curled beside the fire. The blanket wrapped around her small body, her face hidden in the shadows. They hadn't spoken much that day, but she had laughed once. He had told her a story about earth frogs, and she had smiled. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh, a quiet, short sound, but real, and somehow that made the silence now feel even deeper. Suddenly, Tari's eyes opened, wide, sharp, alert. She didn't move at first, just listened. Then she slowly lifted her head. Her ears twitched. Something was out there. She turned her head toward Rook. He didn't stir, still breathing, still asleep. She looked at his rifle, resting beside him, not in his hands. He didn't hear it, but she did. A soft crunch, a branch under a boot, almost silent. But not to her. She slipped out of the blanket without making a sound, bare feet on cold dirt. She crouched low, like a shadow, and moved behind the nearest tree, eyes wide, body still. And then, she saw him. A shape. Tall, armored. Human? No. Wrong symbol. Wrong gear. Enemy. The figure was moving slow, deliberate. He stepped over a log, rifle ready, pointed toward the camp. He hadn't seen her. He was focused on Rook. Tari's hands shook, but she didn't run, she didn't shout. Instead, she reached down into the leaves and picked up a sharp stone. Heavy, smooth. She waited. Just like she had learned, watching Rook set traps, watching him move, waiting for the right moment. The enemy soldier crept closer, 20 feet now from the camp. His finger rested on the trigger. Rook still hadn't moved. The fire cast long shadows, just enough to hide the eye. Girl behind the tree, 10 feet. The enemy raised his rifle, aiming, steady. Tari struck. She jumped from behind the tree and hurled the stone with both hands. It hit the enemy's helmet with a loud clang, knocking him sideways. He spun in surprise, just as Rook woke up. Bang! One shot, clean. The enemy dropped. Smoke rose from Rook's rifle. He sat up fast, scanning the dark. Tari, he called. He didn't see her right away. Then, she stepped back into the light, shaking, eyes wide, but standing. He ran to her, grabbed her shoulders. You okay? She didn't answer, just pointed at the enemy's body, then at the stone on the ground. Rook understood. She had seen him first. She had acted, and she had saved his life. He looked at her like he'd never looked at her. Before you saved me, he said, voice low. She just blinked, then pointed at him, and then at her own heart, just like before. The two of them sat by the fire again. No words, just heat, and the sound of wind in the trees. Tari leaned her head gently on Rook's side. He didn't move, didn't stop her. He just placed one arm around her shoulders. She was no longer the girl who fell into a trap. She was something more now, something brave. That night, under the dark sky, the soldier slept safely, because the girl was watching over him. The forest felt lighter that morning. The sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. Birds chirped in high branches. The cold wind had faded into a soft breeze. Rook and Tari were walking together, just for a short stretch. He wanted her to move a little to stretch her healing leg. She limped slightly but smiled as she walked beside him. Rook carried his rifle loosely on his shoulder. No enemies had come since the one that night. Still, he stayed alert. But today, something felt different, calmer, safer. Tari picked a yellow flower and handed it to him. He raised an eyebrow. A flower? For me? She nodded once, serious. He took it and tucked it behind his ear. She blinked, confused, then laughed. Really laughed. A full sound. Soft but bright, like bells in wind. Rook laughed too, shaking his head. You're trouble, you know that? Tari looked proud. They kept walking down a narrow trail between fallen trees. See this? Rook said, pointing to a tree with deep claw marks. Old fight. Alien hunter, I think. 2 years ago. Tari touched the marks gently, then mimicked claws with her fingers and growled. Rook laughed again. Okay, that's pretty good. They were both laughing when it happened. Click. Rook froze. So did Tari. Her foot was pressed gently on something in the dirt. Her smile dropped instantly. Her face turned pale. She looked down slowly. A small metal plate, hidden under dead leaves. Rook's blood went cold. No, don't move, he said. He stepped forward carefully. Tari didn't move an inch. Her breathing became short. Her eyes, wide with fear. Rook crouched low, his voice shaking. It's a mine. You stepped on a pressure mine. Tari looked at him, confused by the words, but not the tone. She understood enough. Rook set his rifle down and pulled his small toolkit from his belt. His hands weren't steady. You're gonna be okay, he said. Just stay still, I'll get you out. Tari blinked slowly. A tear slid down her cheek. Rook's heart broke. You've come this far, he whispered. Don't you give up. Now. He brushed the dirt away from the edges of the mine. It was old, rusty, but still deadly. He could see the trigger plate, One wrong move. Boom. You're brave, Tari, he said. Braver than most soldiers I've met. She didn't speak. She just watched his hands. Trusting him. He slid a wedge under the edge of the plate. Then another. His fingers worked fast, but gentle. He had done this before. But never like this. Never with someone so small, so close, so important. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, he finally whispered, "Okay. On my count, step off slowly." She nodded. Her foot trembled. 1, 2. Now, she lifted her foot, and he pushed the wedge in. Nothing happened. The mine didn't explode. Rook exhaled sharply. He collapsed onto the dirt. Tari stood still, shaking, then dropped to her knees beside him and burst into tears. He pulled her into his arms. "It's okay. You're okay. It's done." She didn't speak, just cried into his jacket, small hands gripping his sleeves tightly. They sat there for a long time. No birds chirped now, no wind, just breath and tears. Later, back at camp, Tari drew something in. The dirt, a circle, then a foot inside it, then a line through it. Rook understood. "No more walking alone," he said softly. She nodded. He placed his hand over hers, then smiled. "You're not alone anymore." The forest was no longer quiet. The wind screamed. The sky burned red. Flashes of light shook the trees. Explosions in the distance, growing closer. The war had found them again. Rook knew it would happen. He had seen the signs. Smoke trails in the ore. Sky, broken branches, radio silence from his base. Now, enemy patrols moved fast through the valley, burning, clearing, taking everything in their path, and they were heading straight for the camp. He packed fast, no time for full gear. Just essentials, food, water, first aid, his rifle. Then he turned to Tari. She was pale, still weak. The mine scare had left her bruised, and her leg wasn't healing fast enough. She couldn't run. She looked up at him, eyes full of silent fear. He didn't say anything. He just knelt in front of her and gently lifted her into his arms. "I've got you," he whispered, and they disappeared into the trees, together. The forest was fire behind them. Every step was harder than the last. Rook's boots crushed mud, branches, and ash. His breath came sharp, but he didn't stop. Tari held on tightly to his chest, her small arms around his neck. Not crying, just quiet. She knew. He was all she had, and she was all he would protect now. They reached a riverbank after hours of hiking. Rook's body ached. His shoulder was bleeding, scraped from shrapnel. But he didn't put her down. He crossed the freezing water with her in his arms. Every step was like lifting stone. Tari whispered his name once. "Rook." He smiled tiredly. "You said it right this time." Later, thunder rolled over the mountains. The rain began, cold and endless. They found shelter under a broken rock wall covered by an old tarp. Rook collapsed there, his back against stone. Tari slid out of his arms and crawled beside him, pulling the blanket over both of them. He was soaked, wounded, shaking. But when she touched his hand, he held hers tightly. That night he couldn't sleep, not from fear, but because he knew, if they stayed, they'd be caught. If they moved, they'd both fall. In the morning he woke to find her pressing herbs against his shoulder. He winced. She flinched, but kept going. Tari didn't know how to say many words, but her hands knew what care looked like. She had learned from him. And now, she was giving it back. They kept moving, through fog, mud, bomb craters. Sometimes he carried her. Sometimes she limped beside him, holding his arm. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Every glance said, "I won't leave you." On the third day they saw smoke in the sky, white this time, human smoke, a beacon, a base, salvation. But between them and safety stood the final checkpoint, a burned-out valley, No trees. No cover. Open ground. Sniper country. Rook stared across it, jaw tight. He looked down at Tari, her eyes met his. No fear this time. Only trust. He crouched low, checked his rifle, then turned. To her. I need you to stay low. If I say run, you run. If I say stop, you stop. She nodded once. Then, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the scarf. His old scarf. She tied it around his arm. For luck. He couldn't speak, only nodded. They ran across fire and dirt, through bullets and smoke. One of them fell once. The other lifted them back up. They kept going, because they were all each other had left. And when they reached the human line, exhausted and bleeding, a soldier shouted, "Who is she?" Rook answered without thinking, "She's mine, my responsibility, my family." The medic looked at the alien girl, then back at Rook. He saw the truth in both their faces. He didn't argue. He just said, "Then let's get your family inside." The war ended with silence. No victory songs, no big banners, just silence. And the sound of breathing, wounded breathing, survivors breathing, and somewhere in a quiet tent on the edge of a ruined field, Rook sat beside a small bed. Tari was sleeping, her arm wrapped in bandages, a line of stitches across her side. But she was alive and healing. Rook hadn't left her side for 3 days. The medics offered him rest. He refused. They offered warm food. He barely touched it. His eyes stayed on her face. Every breath she took was a reason to keep sitting. Every twitch in her sleep reminded him why he fought. Not for orders, not for glory, but for her. When she finally woke, it was slow. She blinked, turned her head, and saw him. Her lips moved. "Rook?" His tired eyes lit up. "You're awake." She smiled a little, weak but real. "Still here," she whispered. That night, a general visited Rook's tent. He looked at the girl, then at Rook. "You've been through hell," the general said. Rook said nothing. "She's alien," the general continued. "She's not even on the refugee list. What do you want done?" Rook looked down at Tari. She had fallen asleep again, her hand wrapped gently around the scarf she had once returned to him. He thought for only 1 second. Then he answered, "She stays with me." The general raised an eyebrow. "As what? A prisoner? A project?" Rook looked him in the eyes. "As family." The next day, papers were signed. Strange ones, long ones, but at the end, 2 names were listed. Guardian, Sergeant Rook Ellis dependent, female minor, designation, Tari days turned to weeks. Tari began to speak more, slowly, carefully. She learned human words fast. Her favorite word was safe. She said it every time she curled into her new bed and looked at Rook. "Safe?" And Rook would nod. "Safe." She followed him to the mess hall, sat quietly during meetings, learned how to hold a pen, but her favorite place was always near him, where he sat, where he worked. She would sit too, drawing pictures of stars and fire and wolves. She drew one that made him pause. It showed a man and a small girl in his arms. Behind them, a trap lay broken. And under it, she had written 2 words in shaky English, "Not enemy." One day, another soldier asked Rook, "Why did you take her in? You set that trap to kill." Rook stared at the drawing on his desk. "I set a trap for enemies," he said. "Instead, I found my daughter. And in that camp, far from home, with the war finally quiet, a soldier became a father, and a lost girl became someone's whole world."